Okay. Hi, welcome everybody. I'm glad you're here for the session number 7 of our Stopwatch sessions. And today we've got some presentations for everybody. And what we're going to do is have them do their presentations. And once they're done, then we can open the floor for questions and some dialogue. And I will be checking the chat area to make sure I get your questions if you are virtual and you want to ask a question. So please, Laura, you're up first, so go ahead.
Hi, my name is Laura Krier, and I'm the Systems and Metadata Librarian at Sonoma State University. I'm joined by my colleagues Hilary Smith, Research and User Services Librarian, and Mary Wegmann, our Collection Development Librarian, and we are here to talk about our experience with microcollections. At the 2017 Charleston Conference, Jim O'Donnell gave a presentation on the future of print open stacks that gave me some ideas about our own print collection. Our print collection is primarily housed in open stacks on the 3rd floor of our building and in an on-site automated storage and retrieval system. The stacks are dusty and crowded, and our declining print circulation indicates our books aren't getting much use. We're also in the process of rethinking how we use the space in our building. O'Donnell suggested creating smaller, highly curated collections of materials that are closely linked to community interests and needs. The contents of these smaller collections would change over time, continuously highlighting different elements of the overall collection. I was inspired to think about how we could change our approach to the stacks, make better use of our storage and retrieval system, and free up more space in the building for people instead of housing unused books. We could draw more attention to the interesting items in our collection, work collaboratively with faculty across the university, find new ways to engage students with the research process, and change how they perceive the library's open stacks and our space.
So, as with most librarian-driven projects at Sonoma State, the development of the microcollection was highly collaborative. After Laura, Hilary, and I had an initial meeting to discuss whether or not this was something that we wanted to try, we brought the idea to the library faculty for consideration. While there were many potential pros to this collection, for example, highlighting newer and more engaging books and possible integration into instruction, several people also voiced concerns about the added workload and the likelihood that another shelving location would be confusing to users and staff. After talking it through, we decided that we would pilot the collection for 1 semester and then assess how it was used and managed. We also worked collaboratively to determine the goals and theme of the microcollection. We decided that the primary goal was to curate an easily browsable collection that would spark curiosity and inspire students to explore new research topics. A secondary goal was to use it as a teaching tool to introduce LC classification. Our target audience was lower division undergraduates, so we decided on the theme Foundations and Explorations to align with our GE curriculum, which was being revised at the time. We decided to limit the microcollection to foundational and introductory disciplinary texts and recent acquisitions that explored engaging topics in an approachable way. In order to build the microcollection, the liaison librarian selected roughly 1,700 monographs from across the general collection. We were all able to do this at the same time on a Friday afternoon, which allowed for informal conversation and collaboration while building a collection. This proximity allowed us to check in with each other to maintain consistency in the types of books that we selected and just made the process more fun in general. The books were then handed off to our stacks manager who reshelved the items, and Laura created a scope search in our ILS.
We chose to locate our microcollection on the 2nd floor of the library, away from the main stacks, in a high-traffic student study area. This area also included our reference, popular reading, and periodicals collections, and featured a comfortable seating area that encouraged browsing and reading. In addition, the area was adjacent to one of our 2 library instruction classrooms to facilitate integration with our first-year instruction program. Students could be introduced to an information literacy concept, developing a topic, organization of information, etc., and then take a quick field trip to the microcollection to practice those ideas. In one example of integration into our first-year curriculum, instruction librarian Caitlin Springmeyer used the collection to show students how to browse the library catalog, narrow their search, and locate physical items in the stacks. Students were encouraged to find a title that inspired them and use it as a springboard for generating a research topic.
Although we initially planned to pilot the collection for only one semester, we decided to extend the pilot period for the full academic year. At the end of the year, I pulled circulation data for this collection and compared to the data from the main stacks. 13% of the total items in the micro collection circulated that year, compared to only 3% of the items in our main stacks. Our loan periods for students are 16 weeks, the length of the semester, which does limit the potential number of times something can circulate in a single year or semester. However, these data, as well as circulation data for titles that are on display in other places in the library, show that highlighting titles outside of the main stacks can increase their circulation. I also compared the user groups of people who borrowed items from the library. 80% of the people who borrowed from the micro collection were undergraduate students, compared to 52% of borrowers of items in our main stacks. The targeted audience for the collection was our undergraduate population, and it was gratifying to see that they were such heavy users of these items. Our instruction librarian also collected data about instruction sessions that incorporated the micro collection in some way. In 2018-19, 18 instruction sessions incorporated the collection, primarily for first-year instruction. While we don't know whether that correlated to higher circulation, it was useful to be able to learn how librarians use these materials in their instruction.
So beyond the data, what did we learn? Overall, it was a success. Many of the issues that were flagged as barriers at the outset, workload and confusion over location and space, had unanticipated benefits. While the process of identifying and pulling titles for the collection required significant investment of time, the library faculty found it gave us the opportunity to review our collections. We were able to identify gaps, note items that needed weeding, and rediscover some gems. In our library, where librarians wear many hats, this kind of collection work can sometimes fall by the wayside. The process we used, collaborative in planning and implementation, also gave us the chance to share observations about our collection areas overall. We didn't note any significant issue locating items in the collection for our students. Students, particularly first-year students, already had difficulty navigating our stacks. The micro collection simplified access for this group. As we take on an upcoming library space initiative, we're thinking creatively about ways to incorporate micro collections in the future.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Laura Krier, and I'm the Systems and Metadata Librarian at Sonoma State.
Beth, shall I go?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Sure, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Rice Majors from the University of California, Davis, and I'm here to talk to you about intentionality in digital collections. I'm coming at this from a couple of dimensions. The pandemic has really changed user behaviors toward digital collections, following an 18-month experiment where most researchers only had access to digital content. Even digital non-natives have now gained experience and expertise, and I don't think we're looking back. Digital content is now in every syllabus and increasingly in research agendas. At the same time, we have a racial reckoning where higher education is looking at how we can best support the success of Black, Indigenous, and people of color in their research and in the educational outcomes they want in the classroom, and how digital collections can play a role. There have been multiple rich conversations about this happening in parallel. The two I'm most aware of include libraries participating in the Google Books program, where we've had a fairly organic conversation about how we prioritize what we digitize through Google, and a working group put together by HathiTrust that is looking to help their member libraries have actionable items for how they help build out the HathiTrust corpus in a meaningful way. UC Davis is taking this opportunity to rejoin the Google Books program, which will let us digitize about 700 volumes per week at virtually no cost to us. Google then contributes that content to HathiTrust on our behalf, adding to what is available there. Google has been focusing on categories of materials with the most promise for use and reuse, public domain materials and such, which will tend to favor straight, white, male voices who had significantly more access to the publishing channels. But Google will allow us to contribute some material held in copyright in each shipment, which we will use to advance our goals. The order in which we digitize materials really matters. Even copyrighted content becomes available for some kinds of use immediately, data science research and education, support of the print disabled users on our campus, and other fair use purposes that exist now or may come to exist. We also show that we value this content by advancing its digital preservation and its discoverability. In particular, UC Davis is choosing to contribute material that we originally cataloged, that is, material not already in OCLC, which tends to include independent and non-traditional publishers, as well as material acquired to support ethnic studies programs. Within the Google requested material categories, we are also seeking to operationalize how we can send non-English language materials and voices and topics that are underrepresented in digital collections today, while working with strategic copyright holders to get them to consider making some content more open for use and reuse. There are other dimensions to our work as well, as we seek to take advantage of the Internet Archive's goal to digitize microformats to increase their usability and discoverability, to bring our values to bear on what we digitize in-house and through partners other than Google, and to consider how we may want to recontextualize what we have already digitized, so we aren't defaulting to a hegemonic viewpoint in our digital asset management system. Thank you.
Okay, next.
Beth, I'll go ahead.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Meredith Giffin, Collections Coordinator at Concordia University Library in Montreal, Canada. I'll be describing an assessment of Spanish gift books. In English, we say we shouldn't look a gift horse in the mouth. In Spanish, we shouldn't look at the teeth of el caballo regalado. But when it comes to library gifts, this approach is really not ideal. Very often, books offered by donors are simply not appropriate for an academic library collection. And dealing with gifts is also very labor intensive. So libraries normally have policies and procedures in place to evaluate donations before acceptance. When it comes to gifts from faculty members, though, it can be trickier to refuse, and they're often assumed to be more relevant, so they're more likely to simply be accepted. At Concordia, we've received several hundred gift books from a professor in the Spanish program over time, many purchased during their travels in Latin America. The goal of this project was to assess the relevance and the usefulness of these books, and also see if the professor's intention to build a collection of works less likely to be found locally and in Canada was in fact achieved. To this end, a holistic collection assessment approach was used. Based on Kelly's definition here, this meant looking at multiple measures in order to build a more rounded picture of the collection and its impact. First, the scope. It turns out over 800 books were donated over 25 years by this professor. 95% of them are in Spanish. Over 80% are classified under Latin American history or literature, and the remainder are primarily on Spanish language, literary criticism in general, the literature of Spain, or on sociology and feminism. Turning to age, except for one outlier published in 1926, the books were all published after 1960, and as you can see, 2/3 of them were published in 2000 or later. And based on a random sample of 5% of the books, 99% are still in excellent or very good condition. Gift time lag is the time between the publication date and the date cataloged by the library, which indicates how recent a gift book is when received. For these books, the average lag is 7 years, and over 3/4 were received within 10 years of publication. This is far more recent than is typical for donations. For example, in the other gift study referenced here, nearly 90% of their literature donations were received more than 10 years after publication. Looking in more detail at subject, our Spanish curriculum places equal emphasis on the literature and history of Spain and that of Latin America. However, without these donations, the library's collection on Spanish or Iberian history would be about 30% larger than its holdings on Latin America. So the donations in these subject areas have in fact filled a gap in the collection. For Latin American literature, the gifts were mainly by or about Cuban, Dominican, and Colombian writers, although all countries in the region are represented in the gifts. Our other library holdings emphasize Mexico, Argentina, and Chile. The curriculum includes all countries in Latin America, with a particular emphasis on Cuban and Argentinian writers. So here the gifts complement the other library holdings and they fill a gap. However, the large number of Cuban and Dominican works among the gifts is really greater than what the curriculum suggests is in fact needed. For history, the gifts focus on Mexico, Cuba, and the Caribbean in general, but the rest of the library collection is in fact heavily weighted towards works on Mexico. The curriculum does focus on the history of Mexico, Cuba, and the Caribbean more than on that of South America. So in this area, the gift books are pretty much aligned with the curriculum. Turning to usage, loans and in-house use of the gift books on Latin America were compared to other books in Spanish bought over the same period in the same two subject areas. Two measures were used: the percent of items used at least once and the average uses per item. The gift books on literature were used less than our purchased works, which is typical for gifts. However, the history donations actually saw more use than the library selected books in this area. And even the literature gifts were used somewhat more than was found in other studies of gift book usage, such as the two referenced here. The 40% used is higher than the range of 26 to 43% found in these studies. And the use rate being about half that of the non-gifts, it's about the same as the Thomas and Schaus study, but it's twice the level of usage found in the Deodato study. And the higher use of the Latin American history gifts was very unexpected. Now, the 25 years of loans data that were examined here is longer than in these other studies. But still, given that these books are in Spanish and the others measured primarily English language books, this usage was a real surprise. Finally, for availability elsewhere, WorldCat was searched for holdings of identical as well as variant editions of the Latin American gift books. About 2/3 of the works in both subject areas are not found elsewhere in the province of Quebec, and 20 to 24% are in fact unique within Canada. For both subjects, books on Cuba and the Dominican Republic make up a high proportion of these more unique holdings. To summarize, this assessment has answered some questions about the value of these gifts. The books were given when quite recent and in excellent condition, unlike typical donations. The subject areas generally align with the curriculum, and the gifts have helped fill gaps in the collection related to Latin America. The literature gifts have been used less than the non-gift books, but still more than has been found in other studies of donations, while the Latin American history books have been used even more than our non-gifts in this area. This usage is definitely higher than expected for gifts in Spanish. And finally, the majority of these books are not available elsewhere in Quebec, and 20 to 24% are unique within the country. So overall, these faculty member donations are current, they've been relevant and useful, and the professor's goal of building a collection of more unique works has in fact been realized. However, the number of books on Cuba and the Dominican Republic is definitely higher than the curriculum calls for, and fewer of the literature books are being used. On the other hand, these are the books that are less easily found elsewhere. So a fairly unique local collection has in fact been built, including a number of lesser known works. So this is a discovery, a special collection which we can now highlight more within the library and market to Spanish faculty and to students. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let me make sure I was not muted. Okay, great. Thanks everybody for your time. I just wanted to let the audience know that the other two speakers have not been able to, were not able to attend today. So we'll go ahead and start with the questions and answer area of the webinar. So does anybody in the audience have a question? And then
one speaker spoke about selling to internet, donating to Internet Archive. Maybe they can expand on that a little bit.
okay,
There's the intentionality speaker.
right, that was Rice. So writing to them, how does that work?
Sure. And I'm sure that somebody from the Internet Archive would love to hear your question as well. So I'll try to represent the answer. So the Internet Archive has put out a call for libraries that want to donate microfilm, microfiche, microcards, ultrafiche, all these lovely formats that users love. And they would digitize the content and make it available through the Internet Archive, depending on what the material is. It would either be leveraging public domain or leveraging fair use as the Internet Archive interprets it. But it would let them, it would increase the discoverability of the material in a lot of cases, because it would be full text searchable and showing up through various web searches. And it would also potentially, excuse me, increase the usability of the material, because it's almost universal that people would prefer to have a PDF than a piece of microfiche. So we're looking at some collections where we see like zero usage in-house, just the material and the format as that intersection is such that we're seeing zero use longitudinally. I'm talking like the last 30 years. It's never been used, where it just doesn't make sense for us to maintain the material. And in some cases, other University of California campuses already own the same thing in a micro format. So we would just be deduplicating across our 10 campus system.
Great. So this one's for Meredith. How did you let people know about these titles? Email updates, LibGuides? Was wondering how the awareness alone helps the usage of this collection.
There has been no particular marketing yet. This is a project I just finished, so there will be. But so they got no more particular, I guess, marketing than any other new acquisitions, and that they would show up in our former ILS. We had a sort of a carousel, an online carousel of new titles. And the professor who was donating them, she retired several years ago, about 6, but she, would mention them to her colleagues and students. But other than that, there was no particular marketing. However, I think that her knowledge of the program and the curriculum is one of the reasons why, particularly in history, but even in literature, there was more use than I would have expected to see. But now that we know what we have, another interesting thing is that a really high proportion of the titles are by women authors. So that was actually one of her research interests. But I think now we have a collection that we can actually sort of highlight, market, talk about to that faculty and just in general within the library.
And I had a question that I thought of, and somebody else did too on chat, and they're asking, are these materials being interlibrary loaned? Are people finding them at other colleges and universities?
I haven't looked at the data yet. I mean, I'll have to figure out a way to go through it. I think it's possible that we can find a way to check without it being too onerous in terms of data collection. But
yeah, that would be.
I know that some have, like I just know anecdotally that some of them have been lent out, but that would be another piece of data that would be really interesting to see since they're not widely held here.
Sounds good. I have a question for the Laura, Hilary, and Mary. Everybody's like that. They're on chat. They're like, what a great idea. So yeah. But I wanted to ask, did you have a special budget to do this? Did you have to go ask the collections people for a special budget? Or was it just books you didn't order any books? They were just books from the library?
They were books that we already owned. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So no, you didn't have to worry about budgets.
No special budget. Yeah. It's rare that we get a special budget for anything. So.
Yeah, we all know. We all know how that goes.
Right.
Definitely. Great.
And there was a question in the chat too about transferring the materials back to the main stacks, which I wrote in the chat that we already did that. But just to sort of give a little more information about that, we've had a lot of our library space got sort of taken over due to another building project on campus. So we essentially kind of had to disassemble that collection, but it wasn't intended to be permanent anyway. So, it was kind of fine to do that.
It was also interesting to have this project over COVID and, when our physical space was closed, because we really envisioned it as a physical browsing collection. So thinking about, this collection when no one can access the building was interesting too.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Trying to see if there's any other questions. Feel free to type something in the chat if you want. Let's see. I think that's about it. Okay. Well, guys, you've got a little bit of time back into your schedule today. Thank you all, and thanks for the virtual audience to being here. And we hope you have the rest of the day goes well for you and your conference. Thanks.
Thank you.